President Lee Jae-myung, who's on a state visit to the UAE, held a summit with his UAE counterpart and agreed to strengthen cooperation on artificial intelligence, defense, and nuclear energy. South Korea has won a legal battle against the foreign private equity firm Lone Star after 13 years. The decision puts an end to the case that traces back to 2012, when Lone Star filed a $4.6 billion compensation claim against the Korean government. South Korea's ambassador to the United States has reaffirmed that Seoul will keep working to secure Washington's support for North Korea policy. She also noted that she expects progress on nuclear-powered submarines, saying the matter was clearly discussed during the summit between Presidents Lee Jae-myung and Donald Trump. Hello and thanks for joining us on Arirang News. We begin today with summit between President Lee Jae-myung and his UAE counterpart. The two leaders announced a joint declaration for cooperation on artificial intelligence, nuclear energy, and the defense industry. Our presidential office correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports from Abu Dhabi.
Pomp and circumstance were evident at the UAE presidential palace, with the summit beginning with an air show, a 21-gun salute, and a traditional performance. A sentiment of cooperation was shared between Presidents Lee Jae-myung and Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan.
확고한 신뢰와 상호 존중 그리고 형제의 정신을 기반으로 앞으로 어떤 외부의 상황 변화가 있더라도 결코 흔들리거나 후퇴하지 않도록 더욱 견고하게 발전시켜 나가기를 바랍니다.
The special strategic partnership between Korea and the UAE has been bearing fruit in many areas. The economy, energy, high technology, culture and defense are only to start with.
7 MOUs were signed following the hour-long talks, with a focus on AI, nuclear technology, and the space industry. The leaders also announced a joint statement reflecting the UAE's roadmap to become a world-leading nation by its centennial anniversary in 2071, and South Korea's role as its key partner along the way. South Korea also plans to take part in the UAE's Stargate project to build a large-scale AI data center based on their energy mix strategies. The two countries will also expand cooperation on the semiconductor supply chain. On defense technology, bilateral cooperation will be expanded to joint development, technology cooperation, and local production.
This cooperative model will help increase the possibility of our exporters securing orders in the defense industry worth over $15 billion.
Discussions also included building a K-city in the UAE, as well as cooperation on culture, education, and people-to-people exchanges.
Having wrapped up his state visit to the UAE, President Lee's next stop is Egypt for an official visit, where he will be sitting down with the Egyptian president and will lay out his Middle East vision during a speech at a university. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, Abu Dhabi.
And after a summit with UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, President Lee Jae-myung also attended a joint cultural performance at the UAE's presidential palace. The event took place in the Palace Spirit of Collaboration Hall on Tuesday, featuring Korean traditional music and K-pop, as well as the UAE's traditional Al-Ayala dance, a UNESCO-listed intangible cultural heritage. Around 300 guests took part, including President Lee, First Lady Kim Hye-kyung, and senior UAE officials. More than a decade since foreign private equity fund Lone Star first filed a lawsuit against the South Korean government, the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes has announced a final ruling in favor of Seoul. Our An Sung-jin has the details.
The South Korean government has won a dispute against the foreign private equity fund Lone Star. The dispute had been going on for more than a decade. According to the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday, its committee ruled in favor of the South Korean government by deciding to cancel a ruling from 3 years ago, which had originally ordered the government to pay roughly $210 million to Lone Star.
This is a major achievement that protected national finances and taxpayer money, as it recognizes South Korea's sovereignty over financial supervision. This is the result of proactive litigation and responses from relevant government ministries, led by the Justice Ministry.
The lawsuit goes back more than 13 years when private equity fund Lone Star filed a $4.6 billion compensation claim against the Korean government in 2012. Lone Star had purchased Korea Exchange Bank in 2003 for 1.3 trillion Korean won and sold it 9 years later, making a profit of more than 4 trillion won. Despite the profit, the fund filed an international lawsuit claiming that the government interference prevented it from selling at a higher price. In 2022, the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes ruled that South Korea pay compensation of 4.6%, what Lone Star had sought, to which both sides requested an annulment. The presidential office on Tuesday welcomed the victory in the lawsuit and added that the ruling corrects the error in the previous arbitration ruling, which held the government liable for compensation. The government also announced that the committee ordered Lone Star to reimburse 7.3 billion won, roughly $5 million, in legal costs incurred during the annulment process within 30 days. With this, the nearly 20-year saga with Lone Star has come to an end. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, South Korea's ambassador to the United States says Seoul will keep working to secure U.S. support for its North Korea policy through close communication with Washington. This came as Ambassador Kang Kyung-hwa held a media conference with Korean correspondents on Tuesday local time in Washington, D.C. Kang says Seoul aims to act as a pacemaker with the United States as a peacemaker to set the stage for inter-Korean talks and U.S.-North Korea dialogue. And regarding South Korea's construction of a nuclear-powered submarine, Kang said the matter was clearly discussed during the summit between Presidents Lee Jae-myung and Donald Trump. And with their firm determination on the issue, any disagreements within the Trump administration or future procedural matters are not expected to pose major problems. In other news, tensions between China and Japan continue to escalate as Beijing issued a wave of retaliatory measures following the Japanese Prime Minister's recent remarks about Taiwan. China issued a travel alert advising its citizens to take caution, and almost 500,000 Chinese travelers canceled their trip to Japan in just a few days. Our Lee Seung-jae tells us more.
Tensions between China and Japan are rising sharply, with Beijing rolling out a wave of retaliatory measures following Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's recent remarks suggesting that military action by China against Taiwan could justify a response from Tokyo. The fallout has now escalated into what many Chinese commentators are calling a Japan restriction order, a series of coordinated steps aimed at squeezing Japan across multiple sectors. The latest measure comes in the form of travel to Japan. China's foreign ministry issued a travel alert advising its citizens to exercise caution when visiting Japan. Major airlines including Air China, China Eastern Airlines, and China Southern Airlines immediately began offering free cancellations for Japan-bound flights. Within just a few days, some 491,000 tickets to Japan were canceled by Chinese travelers. China's Ministry of Education also warned that public safety conditions in Japan had deteriorated and that crimes targeting Chinese nationals were on the rise, urging students to reconsider plans to study there. Reports also emerged that the release of upcoming Japanese films in China would be suspended. Titles affected include popular animated franchises like Crayon Shin-chan and Cells at Work. Analysts say the pattern is clear. China is strategically selecting areas where its large domestic market gives it leverage and where Japan's economic ties to China are most sensitive. With state media warning that further countermeasures and even suspension of bilateral exchanges remain on the table, concerns are mounting that this standoff could harden into a prolonged diplomatic confrontation. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
On the economic front, the global asset markets are hitting a wall as stocks, gold, and Bitcoin have all been showing weak performances over the past few weeks. Our Park Jun-an explains why.
This year, global asset markets have seen what many are calling an everything rally, driven by sharp gains in U.S. tech stocks, South Korean semiconductor shares, Japanese equities, Bitcoin, gold, and even bonds. The value of all asset types had kept climbing together on expectations of AI-driven growth and steady rate cuts by the U.S. Federal Reserve. However, over the past few weeks, that momentum has been cooling down. Throughout Monday and Tuesday, nearly every major risk asset fell at the same time on global markets. Even gold, which is considered the traditional safe haven, saw something of a decline. The main driver of the market's sell-off was a dip in U.S. tech stocks. Some mega hedge funds are betting against these tech stocks, and some investors are questioning whether the astronomical capital spending on AI infrastructure will ever bring matching profits. In South Korea, the country's two chip giants, Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, which account for over 30% of the Kospi index, saw sharp declines. Foreigners and institutions have aggressively sold, while retail investors stepped in to buy. While just a month ago, the chances of the U.S. Central Bank lowering its key interest rate in December were over 93%. However, as of Tuesday per CME Group's FedWatch, the chances are now 48.4%, which means the bank might actually maintain its key interest rate at 3.75% to 4%. The Fed is taking a cautious stance on lowering the rate, citing inflationary pressures. If borrowing costs stay high because the Fed doesn't cut rates, investors may worry about corporate performance, which could eventually lead them to sell stocks. With a sentiment of uncertainty building across global markets, whether the everything rally can regain momentum remains a question for global investors. 박준환, Arirang News.
Now shifting gears to sports, the South Korean men's national football team closed out the year with a narrow 1-0 win over Ghana on Tuesday in their final match of 2025. At the friendly played in front of more than 33,000 fans at the Seoul World Cup Stadium, defender Lee Tae-seok delivered the only goal of the night with a header in the 63rd minute. Despite the victory, South Korea's performance was considered lackluster against 73rd ranked Ghana. The national team finishes the year with 8 wins, 3 draws, and 2 losses.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. We begin in the U.S. today. A bill requiring the U.S. Justice Department to release records related to the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein has cleared both the House and the Senate, and now moves to President Donald Trump's desk to be signed into law. In the House, the measure passed overwhelmingly with a 427-1 vote, following a month of delay caused by Republican opposition and earlier hesitation from Trump. Trump, however, on Monday said he would sign a bill requiring the Justice Department to release all records on Epstein if it reaches him. The legislation will make public a comprehensive set of documents detailing how federal authorities handle the Epstein case. Previously, over 20,000 pages of documents related to Epstein were released by lawmakers last week. Now to the Middle East. An Israeli airstrike on Tuesday near a Palestinian refugee camp in southern Lebanon has killed at least 13 people and injured several others. The Israeli military said the strike targeted a Hamas training facility believed to be preparing attacks against Israel. Hamas, however, said the attack hit a sports field rather than a training site. Officials note that this is the deadliest airstrike in Lebanon since the ceasefire that ended last year's Israel-Hezbollah conflict. The Lebanese Health Ministry reported that emergency services were deployed to help the wounded and recover the bodies of those killed. In Chile, at least 5 tourists have died in a snowstorm in the Torres del Paine National Park. 4 others who are missing have been found alive. Authorities are working to recover the bodies of those who died. Chilean President Gabriel Boric expressed condolences and confirmed that police and army teams have been deployed to assist with rescue and recovery efforts, which have been made difficult by heavy snowfall and winds reaching 190 kilometers per hour. Officials said the tourists were hiking without a guide and became lost in a remote area of the park, requiring a 4 to 5 hour trek from the nearest accessible point. parts of the national park remain closed due to the severe weather. U.S. film star Tom Cruise has received his first Oscar, an honorary statuette, at Hollywood's annual Governor's Award. The 63-year-old actor, known for Top Gun and Mission Impossible, was celebrated alongside Dolly Parton, Debbie Allen, and Wynn Thomas. Cruise paid a tribute to filmmakers and collaborators across his 45-year career, highlighting the power of cinema to connect audiences and inspire imagination. The Academy cited Cruise's dedication to filmmaking, theatrical experiences, and performing his own stunts as reasons for the honor, recognizing his enduring influence on the film industry. Yoon Se-young, Arirang News.
We're having another winter-like day, but at least the wind is not as strong as it was yesterday. And the good news, starting tomorrow morning, temperatures will bounce back above freezing and will return to something much closer to normal late autumn-like weather conditions. Meanwhile, the East Coast is still very dry, with a dry weather advisory remaining in place. So fire danger remains high. Please stay mindful, even with there being a chance of spotty rain along the coast of Jeollanam-do and on Jeju Island. After the highs will be a couple of degrees higher than yesterday, getting up to 8 degrees here in Seoul, Daegu at 11 degrees Celsius. Now please keep in mind, when the weather suddenly turns cold, your body has to work harder to keep your core temperature steady, which may make you feel tired more quickly. So please give yourself a little extra care. We have been shivering for the last few days. After the cold eases tomorrow, promising weather is on tap under mostly sunny skies through the weekend.
Now that's all we have for today's noon edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned.